Welcome to this training session and thank you for deciding to become involved in Their Finest Hour. Now you're watching this, I hope, because you're interested in organising, running or volunteering at a digital collection day. My aim in this session and in subsequent sessions is to give you all the knowledge and tools that you will need to organise and run your own digital collection day. Before I begin this session, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Matthew Kidd and I am the project manager for Their Finest Hour. Some of those watching may know me from Lest We Forget, which was the precursor project to Their Finest Hour. Also, before we move on, I should say that any forms or posters or materials that I mention during these sessions are available on our website on the toolkit page. So there's no need to panic if you forget something. So what is Their Finest Hour then? Well, it is an Oxford University-led project funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund through to July 2024. It's the follow-up to several similar First World War-focused initiatives. Lest We Forget is the most recent example. In a nutshell, the aim of Their Finest Hour is to capture the stories, objects, artifacts, memories of the Second World War before they are lost to history, and to store those stories, objects, artifacts, and memories in a digital archive for the use of future generations, for the use of researchers, educators, students, anyone that would like to find out more about the Second World War and people's experiences of it. There are some secondary aims to the project. Firstly, we aim to help people and communities learn about their Second World War heritage and to value it more. Secondly, we hope to give people a more complete picture of the war. The artifacts that we place in our archive will range from military-related items such as bullets, medals, weapons, and so on, to non-military related items, diaries, souvenirs, letters, journals of the maybe women and children and men who were not involved directly in the fighting. And thirdly, we hope that through training sessions such as these and our in-person and other online training sessions, we hope to encourage people to think more broadly about preserving stories and artifacts about all kinds of things, not just the Second World War. So we're really keen to emphasize the importance of preservation and the ability to use digital technologies in order to do this. Now, when we spoke to our funder, we promised them that we would hold 35 volunteer-run collection days, i.e. digital collection days where the initiative has really come from people on the ground. We at Oxford will obviously train people. We will help to support it in many ways, but the idea is that those collection days are essentially run by local volunteers in their local communities. At the time of recording, we are well on track for that, and actually we're on track to exceed that by some considerable margin. We have around 90 to 100 people interested in running collection days across the United Kingdom in 2023. We also promised our funder that we would hold 15 larger digital collection days held at national museums, universities, large archives, and public places where Oxford and the Oxford team, of which there are 5 of us, will run that more centrally. So the initiative hasn't come from below, so to speak. It has come from us and from larger institutions. So why do we feel that this project is important? Well, unfortunately, now we're 80 years or so on from the Second World War. The stories of those who fought and died and experienced the war in any way are passing from living memory. The stories and objects of the men, the women, and the children who were part of that generation are being lost. Now, we have to remember that very few families in Britain and across the Commonwealth were untouched by that war. In what was a truly global conflict, over 8.5 million people from the Empire and Dominions served in all major theatres. Now, many of their sacrifices and experiences are now only half remembered from tales that are handed down through generations. So this is possibly our last opportunity to galvanise people, to find those family artefacts, to learn about them, and to share their stories before they are lost forever. Now, another reason why we consider this project to be important is because many of the items that I've mentioned are not recorded. Many of the World War II artifacts are small, they're personal, and they're dispersed. They're often kept in lofts and cupboards and drawers. These aren't the artifacts you find in museums and archives. Now, these items are at risk of being lost when a family member dies, for instance, or during a house move. We also feel there's a growing lack of connection to the war. This is inevitable as time moves on and new generations emerge that don't have such a strong connection to the war, even if it's through family. Now, it's likely that your ancestors were involved in the conflict in some way, and so we're really trying to help keep those connections alive. And then finally, another reason why we think this project's important is that we feel that many people don't recognise the value of the objects that they still have. During Lest We Forget, for example, somebody came along and they had 2 bags. One bag was full of their great-grandfather's war memorabilia, medals, bullets, diaries, that kind of thing. But we as an interview team really had to push them to open up the other bag because the person didn't consider what was in that bag to be as important. Now, that bag included things like journals of their great-grandfather's wife who stayed at home and had to manage the shopping budget and had to deal with price rises and things like that. Now, there's an imbalance there in how people place value on objects, and we really want to encourage people to understand the significance, historical significance, if not sentimental significance, of those items. So we've talked very much around the project and its aim of collecting these stories, collecting these objects, or at least digitally archiving those objects. But how are we actually going to do that? Well, firstly, we have an online archive, which you can find at our website, which enables you to go in right now and upload your story and upload photos of the objects that you have. You can click the button and it will come to us straight away. But the main way in which we intend to collect stories and digitize objects is through organising and training people to organise digital collection days. We will go into more detail about this in the second session, but I will just give you a very brief summary now of what we mean by a digital collection day. Now, a digital collection day is usually a one-day event where members of the public bring along their Second World War related stories or objects to be digitised and uploaded to our online archive. So the aim of the collection day is to collect material held by the public, to digitise it there and then after the event to upload it to our online archive. It's a very simple process, and I should say that this process or this model has been run by volunteers across the UK, across Europe, in a range of different venues, large venues, small venues, schools, universities, libraries, community centres. The idea behind this model is that it can be run anywhere by anyone. And as the images on your screen will show you, it has been run by people from school age right up until to the pensioners. Now, the aim of a collection day is to encourage members of the public to come along to their event and to bring those stories and artifacts together, where volunteers who have agreed to hold one of these days will record all that information and upload it to an archive. So imagine it's a kind of roadshow, an antiques roadshow perhaps, where we don't value the objects, but what we do is encourage people to come along, bring their items, bring their stories together on one day, and we tell them we're going to record those stories and we're going to digitize their objects. Now, to give you an example of the diversity of experiences that we've had running similar projects over the years, we've put 2 pictures up here. On the left, we find an event, a digital collection day that was run by library staff and volunteers. And you can see here it's a very relaxed atmosphere, very calm atmosphere, lots of people sitting down, having informal chats, lots of cups of tea, cups of coffee and biscuits. And this had a very methodical approach to things. The collection day process that I've talked about, and which I will talk about in more detail in the second session, was organised very neatly. In many ways, it felt like being at Argos before everything became electronic. People came in, they took a seat, they were given a ticket, they waited to be seen, They had their stories and items recorded, and then they left. It was a very, very efficient process. On the right, we have a very different scenario. This is at a school in Oxfordshire. Now, the teacher who organised this, along with the school children, I should say, made a real day of it. They not only linked this event, which was a First World War related event, to the history of women's suffrage, but they also brought along living history actors who dressed up as First World War soldiers, who dressed up as First World War nurses, and also brought along replica items and weapons, which the children obviously had a lot of fun playing around with. Now, the atmosphere here was very boisterous. It was very engaging for young people. It was very loud. It was very lively. And the digital collection day element of that day was just one element of a broader educational experience for people. So what I'm trying to get across here is that there isn't a right way of doing it. If the core basis of the collection day is in place, i.e. the 4 stages, which I'm going to talk about in the second session, then theoretically you can attach things onto it, you can run it in whichever way you want. And we do encourage you to be creative.